When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Welcome to the Pokescast. I'm Ryan Thorburn, the Wyoming beat writer for the Casper Star-Tribune. You can check out all of my coverage at trib.com. Follow me on Twitter at @by_Ryan Thorburn. It's May, but still quite a busy time in Pokeland as Jeff Linder unveiled his 8-man recruiting class on Tuesday, and we were finally able to speak to Jeff after a long season, a very painful season, and obviously spring football just wrapped up. So to hit on all these things, I'm bringing in Cody Tucker, the founder of 7220 Sports. Cody, how are you doing?
Doing great, man. Do you remember back in the good old days when we used to be off in May?
Yeah, the transfer portal has sucked us into it, and I don't think we're going to get out anytime soon. That's for football, basketball, whatever, wrestling.
We're in it, man. Yeah, it's 24/7 these days, but hey, man, it's something new every day.
Yeah, I know you talked to Linder after the San Diego State game, the last regular season game. I didn't get on that call. I think that game ended so late, it was just like pointless, and they lost by 100. I talked to him the day before the Mountain West tournament for a preview, which was March 7th. And it's been all silent since then until Tuesday. Obviously, Jeff didn't arrive in Las Vegas for the Mountain West tournament. He was with his ailing father, who passed away March 9th. And then obviously the whole team left for the portal, and they have 8 new guys coming in. And we finally were able to talk to Jeff about all of the above. What was your number one takeaway from just Jeff's media availability and how he handled questions about the past and the future?
One word's coming to mind for me, Ryan, and that's defiant, and not necessarily in a horrible way or a good way. I think you can get excited about his defiance because he's saying, hey, you're going to like these 8 guys I just brought in. I'm still a good basketball coach. Last year was just a perfect storm, as he put it, with the injuries and he's not going to sit here and tell us why guys left the program and all that. So he was kind of defiant in that way, but also it's kind of scary in my opinion, Ryan. And I think you agree with this. The players have the power now, and we can't forget that this roster left, and there was an internal investigation inside this program. So something clearly was amiss, and he said the right things. I made mistakes. I need to look in the mirror, but he didn't get in detail with that. What I took from that is, hey, I'm still a hell of a basketball coach. I brought in a really good class, and forget about last year. Everything bad that could happen happened, and we're moving forward.
Yeah, I get the feeling. I wouldn't say embarrassed is the right word, but he's probably a little miffed that parents of California players put on social media that there were abuses within the program, physical and verbal. I did a big story for Easter Sunday where, I tried to talk to everyone possible and gave them, anonymity, whether that was parents or players that were in the portal and whatever. And, some of them talked, some of them didn't. I got a hold of Mark Rogers. He took the high road, the assistant coach who obviously recruited those guys. I think what it came down to is Tom Berman had to do something. They did an investigation, and they found that, there was nothing physical going on. And, you can parse verbal abuse however you want to. Jeff Linder's an old school hard coach, and he's going to get on you verbally. And, I think if you gave the players from California truth serum and you gave Linder truth serum, you would probably, I think they would all admit to mistakes. And I think if those guys looked in the mirror, they didn't do everything they could to be in the rotation. They didn't adapt to the culture the way they should have, given that they were the new guys. And I think, Jeff is going to try to find guys he can coach hard, and I respect that. But at the same time, I think if you gave him truths from, he might say, I could have eased up a little bit here and there on some certain things.
You would hope so. I mean, and maybe, Ryan, it's because you and I heard Craig Bohl in this very exact spot a couple of years ago. I didn't catch a lot of humbleness coming out of Jeff Linder, but he's a competitor and he's a tough dude. But we saw a guy in Craig Bohl who, then 62 years old, really said, hey, man, I looked in the mirror and I have to have a better relationship with my players. We didn't hear that yesterday from Jeff Linder per se. We heard, I want guys who want to be here, the same stuff we've kind of heard since March. And I'm not dumping on Linder whatsoever. I respect the guy and I really like him. But I didn't catch a ton of humble, like you said, kind of embarrassed, maybe a little pissed off that stuff happened, especially the investigation part. And that, I don't want to say those three guys brought this program to its knees, but it started it maybe.
Yeah. And, I don't know how you feel about this. There was obviously something wrong with the chemistry of the team, but if Graham Ike is never injured and he balls out the way he did the year prior, I mean, do those guys fit in more seamlessly? Is everybody happy? Do they challenge in the Mountain West? You might still have some injuries crop up here and there, but maybe there's more buy-in, and the guys that fill in for the injured players, play at a higher level. Of course, when Ike wasn't injured, I started kind of my story that I refer to. Jeff Linder hinted that the summer did not go well and that there were cracks in the iron early on. So it's hard to say, but I think the number one thing that went wrong for Wyoming was Graham Ike's foot being injured.
That's absolutely right. And, it's an old cliche, of course, Ryan, but I think winning cures all. And when I'm saying all, I think those guys play better. They're happier. Also, I think it cures some of the NIL problems and the transfer portal problems. After the Cowboys lost to Indiana and Dayton, I don't think any of us even thought about the transfer portal, did we? We knew that whole team was coming back. We knew they were coming back on a mission. Winning, I think, can really temper some things, but it's easier said than done, of course.
Yeah, I think Jeff Linder probably rode that team, the 25-win team, as hard as he rode last year's team. And it's just, when you're winning, you buy in and you put up with things. And with the portal, if you don't like the way things are going all of a sudden, or the direction of the program, or, if you're Jeremiah Oden or Xavier Dussel, and Graham Ike decides he's going to go to Gonzaga, maybe you're like, okay, maybe I'll do my own thing too, because, Graham obviously was an elite player that made all those guys so much better. So I think there's blame all the way to go around. And I know fans hate the system. I hate covering the portal, but it is what it is. And now it's about adapting. Like you said, Craig Bohl, I have a lot of respect for him for being an older guy. I mean, I don't believe in ageism. I think if he wanted to coach till he's 70, he's definitely capable of doing that. But It's just funny that the old stubborn coach who won't pass the ball really made an incredible adaptation to the portal. And Linder, I think he's made a great adaptation as far as adding guys via the portal, but has he made the relationship building change? We'll see.
And I think that's key. And I'm with you, man. I'm not even afraid to admit it. I am so proud of Craig Bohl. I never in a million years thought he was going to change. But now every player last year, Ryan, after my interviews, I would say, hey, has Craig really changed? Like, hey, you can tell me. And they go, yeah, man, actually there's times where it's kind of awkward. He comes and sits at our lunch table and he's really involved. And I know Jackson Marcotte, it sticks out that he'd always talk to Jackson about his mom made the best spaghetti he's ever eaten on a recruiting trip. And a big thing with Craig too, not only was he acting that CEO part where you're kind of a robot and you're not fitting in with your guys, then COVID hits to make matters even worse. And then the transfer portal opens wide, and it was a perfect storm for Craig Bohl as well. So the way he turned it around on a personal level is really, really impressive. The old dog definitely learned some new tricks.
Yeah, and I know, like, when you have to ask about the play call at the end of the Boise State game and he hasn't had a cooling off period, he's going to snap at you. And, if I question whether they should kick a field goal or go for it on fourth down more, he's going to, snap back at that. That's fine. That's normal interaction. I know Craig has a lot of respect for the media and that, guys like us covering the team is only good for the program. And without anyone covering or caring about the program, there's no point to it. So I don't know that I have as much respect for Linder as I do Craig Bohl, because I think Linder is a genius. I would never question his X's and O's, but he kind of hinted that we kind of gave up on him. I don't know where he's getting that. So I don't know that he has the same respect for the media that Bohl does, but he certainly was obviously feeling some heat. And I had some articles saying that, it was a train wreck and a disaster. And the San Jose State game in particular, it was completely derailed, obviously.
Yeah.
But I would never question his basketball acumen. I think he's a brilliant head coach, and I will not be surprised, and we'll get into these guys, if these 8 guys, if 5 or 6 of them hit big.
Yeah, I agree. Linder's a really smart guy, and I always harken back to this. I know I've talked about it on your podcast, but when he slowed things down against San Diego State his first year here in the Mountain West tournament, that was the only way you were going to beat those guys. And he toned down the high flying stuff for a game and really muddied that thing up, and I believe they lost by 2. I think he's a really brilliant guy, but we got to admit, Ryan, last year didn't look like a Jeff Linder team. They were chucking up threes all the time, and we'd ask about the shot selections, and he wouldn't exactly freak out and say, yeah, they were terrible. They sure didn't pass the eyeball test. And his teams are known for just shutting down that three-point line on defense, and it never happened. Teams shot better than ever against the Cowboys last year. So it was just a nightmare. It was a nightmare, and there was no other way to put it.
So let's talk about these new guys. I mean, all these fans are like, hey, let's talk about who's here. Okay, let's do it.
I'm going to let you pronounce all these names too, by the
way. What's cool about this, and when Tom Berman was on my podcast, he kind of hinted that they were going to search under every rock for basketball players. And what's cool about this is you have guys from Power 5, you have guys from junior college, you have guys from Division II, NAIA, and obviously 3 freshmen. So you have 8 new players. They could add 2 more if they'd like. It sounds like less is going to be more with this team, that, maybe the chemistry will be better if less guys are trying to complain about playing time. So right now they have, 8 newcomers. I want to start with the 3 that I think have to make a huge impact because they're going to be one and done at UW. And my number 1 guy is Sam Griffin, Tulsa transfer, averaging about 16 points a game in the American. Jeff Linder tried to recruit him out of high school to Northern Colorado. He ends up going to UT Arlington. And then when he got in the portal the first time, the staff tried to get him here at Wyoming. Third time is the charm. This guy, you think about him and Wenzel together, maybe a nice little backcourt in terms of veteran guys. I think this guy is a scorer that's going to help replace some of those Noah Reynolds and Xavier Dussel points.
Yeah, I like him. I think he's the crown jewel of this thing, really. But, a quick fix, right? I mean, he only has 1 year. So you really need to milk everything you can out of Sam Griffin. And really overlooked in high school. I was looking into him. He's in Miami, which is a hotbed of athletes in general. And, he's fighting between going to UT Arlington and Northern Colorado. That's crazy. And this guy's just gotten better and better every year as far as the points go. 244 career three-pointers, nearly 1,500 points already. I mean, this guy's legit, and he needs to ball out his last year.
Yeah, so the theme that you're going to hear is obviously Linder knew about this kid and wanted him 4 years ago. So he was very familiar with Sam and his game. So now let's move on to another guy I think is going to be huge this year, Aquel Cott, guard from Fort Lewis College. Jeff Linder played Division II at Western. His college coach, Bob Hoffman, recommended this kid because Bob still follows it very closely, the RMAC. And Linder's friends with Bob Petrak, the coach down at Fort Lewis. So, again, a kid that is vetted, an All-American, first-team Division II player, flat-out scorer, I think he had 45 points in one game.
He did, yeah.
This kid is going to have the green light, and he's going to be a baller in the Mountain West. And I like that he's probably got that chip on his shoulder. Linder mentioned Derek White, the kid that was at the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs for 3 years, and then finally got a shot at CU Boulder, was all Pac-12, and is now one of the Celtics key rotation guys. I'm not saying Aquel is that, but he's certainly from that mold.
Yeah, and Linder mentioned yesterday he's only 6'2", 165, but he's got a gigantic wingspan. I believe he said he plays more like he's 6'6". Our biggest question, right, coming into this, Ryan, is will it translate? Will their success at lower levels translate? Jeff Linder said yesterday, time and time again, these guys can put the ball in the hole, and it doesn't matter. And something that stood out to me that he said was a lot of D1 guys belong in D2, and a lot of D2 guys belong in D1. So he really likes Aquel. So really excited for him. He thinks that he's going to score. He's going to score a bunch. And I noticed in this class in general, he really went after high percentage shooters.
And I like that he mentioned, this it sucks for Fort Lewis because this guy is the Graham Ike of Fort Lewis, and he's coming to Wyoming because he wants to play up a level. And I know Gonzaga and Wyoming are technically at the same level. Wyoming beat them 20 years ago in the NCAA tournament, but he's friends with Mark Few, so I'm sure Mark Few's like, I feel bad for Wyoming, but I'm taking Graham Ike. So all these coaches kind of feel each other's pain a little bit, and I like that he kind of acknowledged that. Hey, Wyoming fans, by the way, we're ripping the hearts out of these lower guys.
Ryan, that's such a great point. I love that he said that too. And I bet he'd be the first one to say the same thing about the next guy you're going to probably bring up, Mason Walters out of Jamestown, who not only was dominant at Jamestown, he's from there.
He is. I had a chance to talk to Mason on the phone, and it's funny because, so many basketball players, like the Jeremiah Odens of the world have to adapt from coming from Chicago to Laramie, or, guys come from Texas to Laramie. This kid has to adapt to the big city of Laramie. He said it's so much more to do than in Jamestown. And, a true Jamestown hero, obviously their all-time leading scorer, well over 2,000 points. This guy scored more points at Jamestown than Finis Dimbo scored at Wyoming, okay?
That's true.
He's the NAIA Player of the Year. And just like Cott is like, okay, I have this extra year. I'm going to go up to the Mountain West level. And he chose Wyoming over a lot of options. So this guy can rebound. He's 6'9". He's 225. I'm not saying he's a Graham Ike, but I think he's going to fill some of those stat holes that Ike had 2 years ago. I love this guy.
I think what Jeff wants to do is what Jeff's plan was for Ike last year, which is face the basket more and take more outside shots. This guy can hit him from outside at 6'9", 225. He can shoot from all over the place. So he's not just your guy in the middle. But what did Linder say yesterday? That nobody had more touches in the country in the paint than Graham Ike and this guy. So he can make plays there, but he can also shoot from the outside. So and I know that's what he wanted Graham to do last year. He really expected him to start making some hay from the 3-point line. I mean, that's the only way that Graham Ike is going to find his way into the NBA.
The other interesting thing is I asked Linder, did you have all these pieces fitting together in your mind, or is that something you have to figure out? He kind of constructed this roster with a plan in mind. And Caden Powell, he said, has had a brilliant spring, 6'11" sophomore. So you have Caden Powell much improved at the 5. You put Mason Walters in there at the 4, and you have all these shooters.
Yeah.
I don't think the leap from Jamestown to Mountain West is going to be as difficult as a lot of people think it's going to be.
What's funny, though, and I don't know if you picked up on this, is Linder said numerous times yesterday that Brendan Wenzel's had a great spring. I mean, even Court Robertson's had a great spring. Practicing against who?
Yeah, Kenny Foster, a great spring.
Who are they practicing against?
No new illnesses for Kenny Foster. But, but that is cool because I think those 4 guys are going to be like the new hunters, the loyal guys that finish it out. And, in this age, you're going to have a couple, not everyone's going to leave, but those 4 guys are going to be, obviously a huge part of this going forward. So I'm excited to see what Wenzel can do in the spotlight.
Yeah.
and what Kenny Foster can do as a role player if he can finally stay healthy. He was a hell of a high school basketball player, as we know.
We saw him early in his career in Laramie, Ryan, when he was healthy. He's very much that hard hat guy, diving on the floor, going after loose balls at all times. But he also was probably their best pure shooter in Linder's first season here, and even in Edwards' last season. So hard to believe how long he's been around, and we can't even get a clear answer out of UW how many years of eligibility he has left. I think he has 2.
I do too. And Wenthal, I'm not sure of. He might have 2. So,
Yeah.
and I'm never going to say that a guy's not going to transfer because guys are transferring from UConn right now. I mean, it's just nuts.
Right.
But I do know that Powell is an engineering student, that his mom is, the dean of the law school at Baylor. I mean, he's not just here to ball. He's serious about, his degree. So if Caden Powell stays for his full 4 years, that's a great piece for Linder to build around.
Imagine though, Ryan, if Caden Powell could have practiced against Graham Ike all year last year.
Good segue, because now he gets to practice against Oleg Kohinets, a Nebraska transfer, 7 feet tall, 232 pounds, 3 years of eligibility left. He's from Lithuania, and he is I view him as a developmental guy. He played very sparingly at Nebraska. He played less in Nebraska than I think Nate Barnhart played at Wyoming. So these 7-footers are developmental, but it's all about practice. He's going to practice against Caden Powell. He's going to come in, I would guess, off the bench. And similar to Powell, Linder says this guy understands, the screen game. He said Powell's the best screener he's ever coached. This guy can also defensively protect the rim. So again, that's another in Linder's mind. We need a rim protector. This guy could develop into that.
I love that Coach Jenitz, he's from Lithuania and he's played a ton of these tournaments overseas, and he's supposed to play some this summer. And Linder said he's blowing those off, which, as you know, would be really hard not to play for your home country. He's blowing those off so he can come to Laramie and get adapted and get to know his teammates. So really like that. And then when you look at his bio, what really stands out to me is his dad's a 6'11" guy who helped lead UNC Wilmington, I believe, to the NCAA tournament. And his mom also played there, and she's 6'6". So this guy's got basketball and giant blood.
And the final transfer was the first guy to commit to Wyoming during the cycle, Kobe Newton, Fullerton College. Again, Perry Webster, the Fullerton College coach, is great friends with Jeff Linder. So if you thought all of the bridges in California were burned, they are not. Perry Webster helped deliver Chandler Hutchinson to a young Linder at Boise State. Hutchinson was I don't know did he win Mountain West Player of the Year? He was right up there.
Yeah,
First round pick in the NBA with the Bulls. I'm not saying Kobe Newton is going to be that, but he's certainly got the great first name to be a baller at Wyoming.
Yeah, and we keep hearing, his team in Fullerton won a California state championship. And from what I understand from everybody I've talked to, that junior college level is at a whole new level. It's really good, really competitive basketball. He hit 7 threes in the championship game. So he's a guy who can get hot as well. And once again, we're seeing a pattern here, guys who can shoot.
And by the way, Perry Webster coaches these guys super hard. And I talked to Perry and he said, Kobe will love Linder and his style and loves to be pushed. And, he's seen what Dame Lillard did at Weber State with Linder, what Marcus Williams did for 1 year with Linder. I mean, this guy just wants to, like so many of these guys, wants to be at the Mountain West level and prove he can play against Boise State and San Diego State.
Yeah, I mean, he hit 93s last year as well. So, I mean, he can flat out shoot. And I believe he has 2 years of eligibility remaining. And
then the 3 high school guys, I think a lot of the credit for these guys comes to the assistants. Ken DeWeese found Nigel Cook, 6'6", freak athlete in Florida. Linder said he has eye-popping athleticism. But that he needs to put some meat on his bones. So he'll be in the weight room. So it's hard to say what his impact will be. because on one hand, Linder's saying, he needs some development. On the other hand, he's saying he's a freak athlete and nobody wants to redshirt anymore. So I'll be interested to see about him. What do you think about him?
Yeah, well, DME Academy, first of all, is a perennial top 10 prep school in the United States. I mean, that's Daytona Beach, Florida. That's why yesterday I had to be, got in that last question about how in the hell did you guys land this cat? Villanova offered him, and once Villanova offered, some more offers started to pour in for him. So it sounds like he's a really raw kind of guy, but when you watch his tape, it's really impressive. And the one thing I want to say, Ryan, about getting these three high school guys is these are my favorite signings because it could have been really easy to have a knee-jerk reaction and just go nuts and say, we're going to be portal guys, a la what we saw at Utah State football with Blake Anderson when he got here from Arkansas State. And then, of course, won a Mountain West championship with, I believe, 25 new guys on his roster. But they didn't get away from this high school model. And Linder had a great point that these high school kids are getting neglected these days. Because of COVID and because of the portal. So a lot of teams are going with that where they're loading up on portal guys. It's a perfect time to take some high school guys that are kind of, they need to take what they can get in some cases.
Yeah, and Linder's new assistants, Nick Whitmore is an academy guy, so he has ties to these academies. He has ties to the East Coast and also to the foreign recruits. Obviously they got the kid from Lithuania, and then Ryston Williams, the other assistant, was at Indiana State. He's from Kansas City, which is a great place to recruit. They get Cale Combs, a guard from Nixa, Missouri, and then Cam Manuwu, a forward from Kansas City. These two guys, Linder said Cale's ready to ball now. Cam, certainly 6'9", 215. That sounds good, but he's not going to turn 18 until December. So a little wet behind the ears, but certainly these three guys kind of remind me of the 2020 class, which obviously produced Ike, Dussel, Williams, Oden, etc. Guys that were late in the process, but really talented. And Linder didn't have to do it over Zoom this time. So these three might pan out just as well.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. They land this Cam kid out of. They got he originally committed to Indiana State, and he decided to get out of his NLI and come to Wyoming. So that shows right there that there's a really good relationship between the assistants and these new assistants that he just brought in. And yeah, Kel Combs, he said he's ready to go, and he comes from Nixa, Missouri, which is just right outside of Springfield, and. He averaged 24 points per game, shot 44% from behind the arc. He certainly sounds like a Jeff Linder recruit to me.
So I think Wyoming fans, I don't know what their level of interest is in this team at this point. Probably still a little shell-shocked from what happened over the last year, and I understand that. But we've covered so many or followed so many Wyoming teams that like last year's that were picked second and it goes awry. This team is going to be picked near the bottom of the Mountain West, but I don't get the sense at all that Linder is any less confident about this team than he was about last year's team, which says something.
I don't either. And you know what, Ryan, once again, the comparison with Bowl. I know last year people are not happy just to go to an Arizona Bowl. They're not happy to just win 7 games. But if you keep that in perspective, he started having better relationships with guys, and the third youngest roster in the country won 7 games and went to a bowl game. With 2 weeks to go in the season, they were playing for a shot in the Mountain West Championship game. I mean, who the hell would have expected that? No one. And when Linder came in, kind of what I would hope, if I'm a fan, what I would hope for is exactly like you mentioned about that 2020 team. Yeah, they weren't ready to go toe-to-toe with San Diego State. They weren't ready for Boise State. They got one from Colorado State. They were competitive and they were fun to watch. And they were guys that we said, wow, watching these guys grow is going to be a lot of fun. They popped off and won a couple of games they shouldn't, beat Nevada, swept Nevada and Laramie. But they weren't ready, but they were damn fun to watch. And every game you watched, you said, man, if this team grows together one more year, they could be really good. And they ended up in the NCAA tournament.
The other cool thing about it is this is not a building process. 3 of these guys are one and done, like we talk about. And Linder noted in this era now, every year you're going to have a completely different team. I don't expect them to lose 8 guys next year, but they're going to lose half the team, whether that's
Yep.
graduation or portal. And Linder's going to go back to his roots and find vet and find 6 or 7 new guys next year. So every year, whether you're at Duke or Wyoming or wherever, it's a reload every year. And that's where the sport is right now. And you can either embrace that and get to know teams every year, or you can, I guess, put your head in the sand, because every year it's going to be a whole new dynamic for every team in the country, pretty much.
In this day and age, Ryan, it's really more important than ever to pull for the name on the front of the jersey than it is the back, for one. And I think a way to start keeping these guys together is that relationship building. Tom Berman mentioned to me on our podcast a few weeks ago that players at UW are actually texting their coaches saying, I'm going to the transfer portal. And that shows him, and it shows me, that those relationships suck. So now if Jeff comes out and he's a totally different guy, which I'm not suggesting lower the standard, which he keeps bringing up. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting sitting down with a guy and going, how's your family? How's your parents? What are you up to? What do you do when you're not at the court? Hey, I see you in here 24/7 and everybody loves gym rats, but hey, go have a life. Go live. Go be a college kid. If he does that kind of stuff, I think it's going to carry so much weight that a guy might go, you know what? We're building something special here. Yeah, maybe I'm not crazy about Laramie. Yeah, maybe we only won 15 games last year, but I love my coach. I love my teammates. I love this culture. I think that could develop into winning, and that could keep some guys in-house.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it should be noted, as much light as we try to shine on, a dark season, we're not allowed to be at practice and that sort of thing. And Jeff did mention all of the guys by name that moved on, including the 3 California guys, and said, I wish them all the very best. And he noted that, quote, I can sleep at night because I know what goes on a daily basis. And I was in my office watching film with all of those guys and talking to all those guys. And so, maybe as we know, social media is not real life. And I'm sure there are hard feelings, from a number of players, but Jeff Linder, feels like, he's doing it the right way, and we'll see how this group reacts to it.
He also said yesterday that players are way different than they were 2-3 years ago. So yeah, even though he said his heart was in the right place, maybe it's time to put your mouth in the right place as well, instead of screaming, yelling, going nuts 24/7, which, like you said, we don't get to watch practice. We don't get to see that stuff, but by all accounts, he was nothing short of brutal last year. And that's because of the expectations and the injuries that he can't help. It's kind of like when Craig Bowl couldn't help COVID. It's frustrating as hell, but hopefully this is a chance to hit the reset button and go, you know what? Instead of yelling this time, maybe I put my arm around a kid. And we know Sundance Wicks played good cop, and we know that Ken DeWeese played some good cop. And even yesterday, Linder mentioned there has to be a bad cop, and it was him. But maybe bad cop doesn't need to throw you on the ground and cuff you and put his knee on your back. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And before we move on to spring football, you just mentioned Sundance Wicks. I just want to note that Sundance Wicks is from Gillette. He's a great human being and a great coach. And Jeff Linder is super excited that he was able to get a head coaching job despite Wyoming's horrific season. And, I know there was a connection there with the president at Wisconsin Green Bay was a staff member a faculty member at Northern Colorado when Jeff was there. So, Jeff gave a great recommendation, and, you posted a story on it. I retweeted the tweet. I mean, Sundance received some hate mail from a Wyoming fan that was just reprehensible. And I know one bad apple doesn't represent the entire orchard, but Wyoming fans need to support guys like Sundance Wicks, whether they leave or not.
Yeah, I mean, think about Vegas, man. I know he had an impact on you and I with his post-game press conference the last time we would ever talk to Sundance. I mean, he damn near had us in tears with how emotional and how just how you could tell how much these kids meant to him. It just oozed out of him. And yeah, the hate mail thing was really gross. And the only reason I felt compelled to write that, Ryan, is because since I've been on this beat, I've seen it with Tyler Vanderwall. I've seen it with Levi Williams. Hunter Maldonado alluded to it. Like, enough is enough. And if you zoom in on that letter that he got, it mentions Noah Reynolds. And that was the beauty. That's part of the beauty of Sundance Wicks. He blocked it out. He didn't want Noah Reynolds to be in the middle of that, but somebody was pissed off that he left and he took Noah Reynolds with him. That's the way it goes, man. Sundance found Noah Reynolds in Peoria, Illinois in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. The only strange thing about Reynolds is why did he commit to Wisconsin for a hot minute and then end up with his brother in Sundance? I mean, just do what we all thought you were going to do. But that's kind of the portal. Kids want to get in there and they want to be recruited. Guys that weren't highly recruited, and it's weird in there.
Yeah, and it had to feel good for Noah Reynolds. I mean, he was not recruited out of high school. So here's a second chance to be the pretty girl, and he was the hot commodity. And I tell you what, I know people have hard feelings toward Noah Reynolds, but he is a hell of a basketball player. He's thick, and I had guys questioning if he could even play in the Big Ten. I covered the Big Ten for 2 years. Yes, he could. He is that kind of a bulldog. The only worry, of course, is the head injuries.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, the spring game was last Saturday at the War. We finally had good weather. The sun is finally out in Laramie, and I'm going to enjoy every second of it. And I don't want the summer to end anytime soon, but the countdown is on, Cody. I mean, spring football is over. Texas Tech is on the clock. And I know that me and you are both bullish on this team. And just what was your impression of spring football? What was your number one takeaway?
They're deep. They're really deep. And that's, when you think about the smaller schools beating the bigger schools and making big runs and having really successful seasons, it's because they're deep. Injuries are going to happen. Some of the better Cowboy teams in my generation, and, I think in 1996, that's probably the best Wyoming team of my lifetime that I remember. And they didn't have a lot of depth. They had a lot of great starters, but they didn't have a lot of great depth. And we've seen some really good defenses here under Craig Bohl, but this one, might be the best because they are loaded at every spot. And usually the black eye, if you will, of the defense has been at the cornerback spot. That doesn't appear to be the case anymore. They appear to be about 4 or 5 deep over there. So really excited for these guys. Plus they're young, they're energetic. I didn't take much from the spring game, Ryan. I saw people jumping off a cliff because of the quarterback play, and these DBs are really good. And the offense was missing a ton of linemen. All three of their top running backs are out. Gunnar Gentry's out. I didn't expect much. I think Craig Bohl is probably really excited about this spring because a lot of guys who didn't play, we know what they can do, and they're just saving some wear and tear on their body. So I didn't take much from that spring game, but I think this defense is going to be lights out. I think the running game is always going to be lights out. And if I'm encouraged about one thing on offense, it's those big tight ends catching balls 25 yards down the field.
Yeah, after last Thursday's practice, which was their last real practice, the spring game was just kind of for fun and to let people see Wyoming and Wyoming uniforms and get excited. Craig Bohl was so pumped up, and he had just watched Top Gun Maverick. I think that had something to do with it. And he wanted to get in his Harley and get in a jet and fly, to the Mountain West coaches meetings. But I think one reason he was so pumped up is because of what we actually did see in the spring game, which was Tyrekus Davis and Colby Taylor, 2 cornerbacks that they've been bragging about all spring. Tyrekus Davis with a pick 6, Colby Taylor with a nice break on the ball for an interception. Both of those interceptions, depending whether your glass half full or empty, were against Andrew Peasley, the number 1 quarterback. So you mentioned depth. Those two, I think, have made a strong case to start on this defense. And then you have Ja'Cory Hawkins, a very talented athlete who sat out the spring, started last year, is also back, along with Deron Harrell, the Wisconsin transfer, big pick against Colorado State. Before spring started, Jay Sawvell said we need more depth at corner. Last year we had 2, we need 4. I think they have at least 4 right now.
I do too. I mean, for 3 years there, they were really banking on CJ Colton and Azizi Hurd, and there wasn't much behind him. So I think you're right. And it's part of the unfortunate thing about missing spring, though, right, is Ja'Cory Hawkins might have got jumped here. And Connor Shea might have jumped Shea Suianoa as well. It's how it goes, man. They're going to put the best guys out on the field. But if you look at it from a really positive perspective, say Colby Taylor, who's all of 6'2", huge wingspan, really looks the part. Say he's just following a blazing running back all over the field and he needs a blow, he can get a blow. Deron Harrell can come in, Ja'Cory Hawkins can come in, and they got some new guys coming in that are incoming freshmen. So I think they're in a really good spot. Every time I talk to Jay Sawvell, he's like, don't be pumping us up that much and don't be getting the cart in front of the horse. But if this defense can create turnovers, they're going to be really, really filthy.
They also like Wyatt Eckler at strong safety and Isaac White at free safety. I think if you're looking for an area where they need depth, it's at safety. But here comes Buck Coors. I mean, he was,
Andrew Johnson.
And Andrew Johnson, the Cheyenne kid. So, Buck Coors was making some noise at nickel, last fall and then had his, horrible leg injury. And then, Andrew Johnson, obviously a talented kid, a developmental kid, looks like he's ready to go. So depth there potentially. Buck Coors with an interception in the spring game. And then Rook Brown. I mean, Rook Brown needs an NIL deal. This kid should be every Wyoming fan's favorite person because he's, what is he, 5'8"?
Yeah, he's small.
150 pounds, maybe. I don't know. He looks like a soccer player from Europe. And he is murdering people, unfortunately, including his own teammate, Caleb Merritt, in the spring game. A teachable moment where Bull's probably angry, but inside fist pumping about this kid.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And Rook's great. I remember we met him for the first time after the New Mexico game last year, and I thought maybe he was a support staff guy, and he was standing there ready to be interviewed, and we're like, who the hell are you? Oh, you're the guy who just had 10 tackles in your first start? Wow. I mean, he's really impressive. But I tell you what, who stood out to me, and talk about an embarrassment of riches, Jaden Williams at the defensive tackle spot. He had himself a monster game. He blew through the line so quick and stripped Sam Scott in the backfield like it was no big deal. I believe he had 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. He led the team with 6 tackles. He's maybe 6 deep on the defensive tackle list right now. I mean, they are just loaded up front, and that's where the games, as we know, are won. I think they really have some edge rushers who can get around there. Sebastian Harsh was limited, of course, after coming off a season-ending injury. Those guys, Braden Siders hasn't even practiced all spring, recovering from surgery. I think they got big run stoppers. And not only that, we've seen Cole Goodbow and we've seen Jordan Bertinelli get to the quarterback as well. I think they're just going to give offensive lines complete fits this year.
Yeah, I don't think Craig is probably going to release a depth chart, and I don't think it's smart to this day and age, although the portal is closed, so why not? But, I played the depth chart game just in my head, and at nose tackle, you have Cole Goodbow, who I think is a potential All-American. Gavin
Absolutely.
Meyer, who I think if Cole would have went on to the NFL would be an All-Mountain West nose tackle. And then Ben Mustard Gas Florentine, who you did a story on. Tough as nails, California kid. That's your nose tackles. Then defensive tackle, obviously Bertinelli, another great Wyoming homegrown stud. Caleb Robinson, huge dude who's, has the experience now. And you mentioned Jaden Williams. He looks like an absolute beast. So those are just the 6 that, I have penciled in, and they recruited very well at those positions. This last year.
Are we shocked that Oscar Giles, our position coach, just got promoted to assistant coach or associate head coach? I'm not. And the head of the freshman team, and also just doing unbelievable work down in Texas in the recruiting game. I mean, he's been a huge pickup for this staff.
Yeah, I need one of these raises where they're like, Ryan, you are our new Wyoming beat writer / content producer / podcast person. And, one of these long titles that these guys have, I know Mike Grant has a long title. Oscars might be even longer right now, and
Yeah.
well deserved, because Texas is treating Wyoming well, and Oscar is a big part of that. And when you play Texas Tech in Texas, it's a chance to even go deeper on that and get more eyeballs on Wyoming football down there.
Something maybe we're not giving enough credit to as well, Ryan, for those people who haven't read these stories. Oscar Giles spent last year living in the dorms with these guys. Mm-hmm. And that was more not to babysit, but to be a shoulder and to be an ear for these kids. I mean, can you imagine what that's doing as far as building relationships and guys not entering the portal? Because that guy is lovable. And here they are living in the dorms and watching a guy who has plenty of money to live in a really nice house wherever he wants, and he's living in the dorms with you. So I think that carries a ton of weight, and I could see how he'd be so easy to have a relationship with. And he stepped in for a guy in Pete Kalagis who was beloved, who was at UW longer than any other coach. So what a seamless transition for the Cowboys here to get him, and he's just a great human being.
Yeah, and just to wrap up the defensive depth chart, you mentioned Connor Shea. I know his specialty is middle linebacker, but all Wyoming backers, learn both positions. Easton Gibbs is going to start. I know Craig said, that Shea could challenge for the starting spot, even though, Shea was playing middle linebacker this spring. I think you're right. It could be on the weak side with Suya Nano, but that kid's talented too. I think I see Connor Shea, whether he wins the weak side spot or not, rotating with both those guys like, Chad Muma used to do in the old days when they had studs at both positions.
Absolutely. We've talked about it so much. Shea Suinoa was Johnny on the spot all year. His trouble was wrapping up and making tackles. But this was his first year playing on the defense last year. In 3 years, he was a quarterback in high school. So he's got everything down except for wrapping up. And that, of course, has been on his mind all year, as well as getting beat for that winning touchdown against Ohio on a perfectly thrown ball in the back of the end zone. Don't get it wrong. Shea has been stewing on that stuff, and he knows Connor Shea's coming. So I would expect a really good fall camp from Shea Suinoa, but I'm with you, man. It just helps that now they're going to be able to rotate everywhere in that linebacker core.
Yeah, and Cole DeMarzo missed spring, but he has all the measurables, transferred from Michigan State last year. He's going to be a factor at some point in his career at Wyoming. So my question, just to sum up how good this defense is on paper, and I know Jay Savell, if he's listening, is probably like, all right, enough on the defense, go to the offense. But you mentioned Braden Siders, Devon Harris, Sebastian Harsh. I mean, one of their only real questions, like, who's our fourth dynamic pass rusher? Could be Keelan Cox, the Alabama transfer, had a fumble recovery. Could be someone we don't know about. But when you're getting down to who's our fourth defensive end, or who can we really count on at nickel if something happens to Rook? I mean, those are only a couple questions they have right now.
Yeah, and I mean, last year, if you think about it, with Boise State in town at the defensive tackle spot, you're talking Ben Florentine and Ethan Drews. They were in for some clutch moments, and Ethan Drews helped Gavin Meyer cause that fumble late in that Boise State game that started. George Halani, I think I looked at you in the press box and said, George Halani has never fumbled in his college career in 200 and some attempts. Sure enough, there comes the ball, and two guys that are not starters are lined up at defensive tackle. So I'm not worried. And I think Brian Hendricks is the perfect coach for that position. And I think they're going to have a guy ready to roll if need be. I mean, I was there in 2020 for that first COVID game against Nevada, and you're sitting there looking, how the hell do you pronounce this Bertagnoli? Who the hell is this guy? Oh, he's a walk-on from Casper who played wide receiver at Natrona County, and he had a breakout game. So I'm not worried at all who that fourth guy is.
Yeah, and just, to your point on offense, the spring game, I mean, I wouldn't get too excited about anything that happened on offense or too down about anything that happened. Harrison Whaley didn't play. DeWyan McNeely didn't play. Duke James didn't play. Caleb Driscoll didn't play. They were down to 3 tackles. It was just
tight ends were limited.
Yeah, it was just it's not what the offense is going to look like September 2nd in any way. Now, I mean, it is kind of disappointing that Peasley threw a couple picks. Evans Svoboda did not look great. Jaden Clemens was efficient, but didn't really have, none of them had a touchdown pass. The most exciting play was Tarikas Davis's interception return for a touchdown. So the quarterback position is a question mark. I think it's just like last year. Andrew Peasley is a great leader. He's beloved. He has the talent to get it done. And it's just a question of giving him enough around him to help him get that done. And, I just hope that, whether it's Svoboda or Clemens, that they feel good enough about that number two person that they let Peasley run quite a bit this year and just turn him loose.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was going to say. And if Wyoming has their trademark running game, and we've said this for years, that should open up plenty of passing lanes. And these tight ends are really talented. If there's one other MVP of this spring, you would have to say it's probably John Michael Gillenborg right there with Colby Taylor. He's probably the offensive MVP. And we saw him make a 27-yard grab down in the red zone in this game. Those are big, huge targets that should be wide open if the running game is humming. And also, I'm with you 100%. They did not let Peasley run a lot last year. They really preserved him. He was facing some injuries, and let's face it, he's not a big guy. So this year, it's his last year. It's his last hurrah. He's going to know the playbook. Craig Bowles brought that up 100 times, that he was learning the playbook. It's so much different than Utah State. Now he's got a full year plus into this playbook. Plus, just instead of throwing some of those away, let him be his athletic, elusive self. We saw him bust up the gut against San Jose for, a 60-yard run. At Illinois, he was probably the only bright spot as far as the running game went. He was blowing around the corner there a few times. He's really talented in that area, and it's time to let the chains off. And like you said, you got to believe in who that guy behind him is, because Peasley is not a big man, and if he gets hurt, who's up?
Yeah, and I think Trayton Welch and John Michael Gillenborg will be his go-to guys, and they're both tight ends. And I think over the 14 practices that we didn't watch, it sounds to me like Wyatt Wieland really stepped up and is definitely a frontline starting wide receiver. The thing about Wyoming wide receivers is they only start 2 of them, and they've got about 12 of them to choose from. I'd like to see Alex Brown take over the X where Cobbs was and Naor was before that, just because of the physicality we've talked about. I don't make a lot that he was, pretty quiet this spring. He's coming off, some injury stuff. So, you have Caleb Merritt out there. You have Jalen Sargent. And then you have, obviously, the transfers coming in, Devin Bodie Jr. and Ayir Asante. They'll get into the mix there. They have plenty of depth and competition there. They just need a couple more guys to emerge the way Wyatt Wieland has.
Yeah, and Will Pellissier is a guy who we expect to be healthy by fall. Same goes with Gunnar Gentry. And by all accounts, when Gunnar Gentry was healthy, I had a coach actually tell me he looked just like his brother. And I hate to get people all excited, because I know Gunnar's had some injury history, obviously, these last few years. But if you can get even half of a Tanner Gentry, you're in really good shape there. But the ones, I think you can't discount how huge it was to get the monkey off the back for Sargent and Merritt just making a catch or two in the Arizona Bowl. Imagine you're a wide receiver and you finally get that moment over with and in the rear view, and now you can just go play ball. And I really think Caleb Merritt's going to be really good in the slot. And Jalen Sargent, is almost as big as Alex Brown. So take that next step, go make some plays, and you're off and running.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think about, because, after the Arizona Bowl, I kind of thought it was one of the strengths of the team. But with Emmanuel Pregnon going in the portal and going to USC, I think the offensive line is probably the number one area to keep an eye on during fall camp. They need to develop some guys there in a hurry. Obviously, Frank Crum is anchoring the thing at right tackle. I believe Caden Barnett, who did not play also in the spring game, will be the left tackle. I think they really like those guys. Obviously, Fia at center is a stud.
Yeah.
And Jack Walsh, I assume, will be the right guard.
Yeah.
Where Pregnon was, because he's a stud. He could play right guard, left guard, one of the tackle spots. I see him at right guard next to Frank. Keep that side of the line a strength like it was last year. So you're looking at, probably some redshirt freshmen is going to have to step up and be the left guard. Beyond getting a swing tackle and some depth and finding a starter at left guard, it's in decent shape, but they need some more bodies there that they can trust.
Yeah, I think they're going to be in good shape, and I believe Frank Crow is actually going to make the move to left tackle this year, so he's going to be protecting Peasley's blind side. So you like that move. He's definitely the veteran of this group, and I loved how Craig Bohl kept saying this is a 6-year guy, and he's fighting his ass off to get into practice, which most 6-year guys, I talked to Marcus Harris and Ryan Yarborough, and they were like, man, we were sitting on the golf cart. We didn't want to take any chances during the spring ball. So it's nice to see that with him. But yeah, I think you're talking and I know you've talked from Wes King, Rex Johnson, Luke Sandy. Those are some names that might get in there. They do have some really big true freshmen coming in, but Craig Bohl has said numerous times that is one of the hardest spots to crack because you have to have it mentally, physically, and be ready to roll. And I thought for the most part, even though it was makeshift, I thought the line held up pretty damn well in the spring game until the end. At the end, they started leaking a little bit, but I'm sure they were tired and they haven't played this much football in a long time. So I think they have some really good pieces and they have some really good running backs that are going to make up for some mills anyway.
Yeah, I knew they were experimenting with Crum at left tackle. I think they're afraid to just come out and say it because you have to be an athlete there, and he's so big. But I think the fact that Eric Aboje was able to do that, not a great athlete, but a really good offensive lineman, played guard, right tackle, then left tackle. I think the formula is there for Frank to do that. And boy, will that help him next year during the NFL draft if he shows that versatility. And if he keeps Andrew Peasley healthy and clean, talk about a legacy Cowboy and a Hunter Maldonado of the football program. That's Frank Crum.
That's a great way to put it, Ryan. I was wondering, were you shocked at all to see any of these Wyoming guys picked up as far as the NFL goes?
Not really. I mean, I think hopefully TV broadcasts can adjust this and be like, okay, here comes Xavier Valladay, the rookie from Arizona State / Wyoming, because he's a Wyoming Cowboy. I was not surprised to see Valladay make the NFL and get a nice contract as an undrafted free agent. I was surprised he didn't do it last year, to be honest with you.
He's got a lot of miles.
He told me before the Hawaii game that, I was like, he kind of hinted like, yeah, this is going to be my last introduction of the war. And then he got mad that I kind of wrote that, but I just assumed he was going to the NFL draft, and he ended up going to the Portland, having a great year in the Pac-12. So I'm happy for him, and I think he'll be a good pro. And that just shows how talented he is. The only reason he didn't get drafted is because he's got 1 million carries on him already. And NFL GMs want guys that don't have a lot of carries, young guys from power programs that only got their shot, late in their career or whatever, that have a lot of miles to go. So Valladay, I'm not surprised at all. Titus Swin, I don't think he's quite at the level of Valladay, but I'm glad he's getting a shot with Indianapolis. It didn't end well at Wyoming, but certainly I think even though things didn't go well at the end between him and the coaching staff, I think his heart in general is in the right place, and I hope he gets a good shot there in Indy. Aboje is kind of a long shot. Like I said, he's not a prototypical NFL tackle, but maybe Miami sees him as more of a guard, and maybe he can stick. I don't know. And then obviously ZZ and Colton were super Mountain West starters and did pretty well at Power 5 programs, big Power 5 programs. So not surprised at all. I think next year is a year where you'll start seeing Wyoming guys drafted again. They didn't have very many seniors last year, but certainly Cole Goodbow comes to mind for me. And I think they have some other guys with NFL bodies for sure.
Well, I think Frank Crum definitely has some NFL size, no doubt about it. So would really like to see. I was thinking about what guys would be drafted next year, and Cole Goodbow, of course, comes to mind immediately. But I think Frank Crum could maybe make a splash here, especially if he starts at left tackle and plays all 14 games, you hope.
Yeah, and you wonder, I know they have eligibility left, but certainly Devon Harris is a unique football player. He's not that big, but him and Siders are just crazy getting to the quarterback. And it's interesting because Savell told me that, what were they ranked? They were in the top 20 in sacks, probably like around 15. Savell's like, we should have been in the top 5. We missed so many sacks. So when you have Harsh crashing the party too, I mean, it's exciting time for Wyoming's defense for sure. And you're going to need it against Texas Tech.
Yeah, and the one that hurts is, speaking of, to Sawbell's point, is that Boise State game. They had 10 quarterback hurries and they had 0 sacks in that game. They get 1 sack out of those hurries, who knows? So, yeah, you're absolutely right. And you have to wonder, too, if Easton Gibbs has another 120 tackle season and throws in a couple of pick sixes and stuff like that, if maybe, like Muma, he decides, hey, it's time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys that are listed as juniors or even sophomores have been here 4 years. So a lot to like there. And what is that noise? Oh, that's the portal door is now closed, Cody. And I know that there's, 15, 16 names in there this cycle for Wyoming, but not a lot of big names, not a lot of starters. You mentioned earlier in the podcast that players have the power now. They do, but so do coaches. Look at what's going on at Colorado with the portal. Deion Sanders said, I'm bringing my Louis luggage. You guys are Samsonite, and you're all getting in the portal, and I'm bringing in 70 new guys. That's going to be a grand experiment in the other direction. But when you look at the average number of Power 5 programs, what their portal numbers are, it's about 16, 17. That's about what Wyoming is, which is a non-Power 5. So as bringing it full circle, I think Craig Bull has adapted and changed, and I will not be surprised if they kick the door down this year, but I don't want to get people's hopes up too much. But this is a championship defense with an All-American kicking team and a Studley running game. We all know what the missing equation is, and if they balance it at all, this is a heck of a football team.
Yeah, I want to say with Max Jones going into the portal right before it closed, he was number 17 for the Cowboys, but Craig Bull did what Deion Sanders did in a very quiet, professional manner. I couldn't believe when I saw fans saying, see ya to a guy like Gavin Bierup. He was told to, you're going to need to go somewhere else. And I bet Wyoming would even help facilitate him going somewhere else. Basically give them a beautiful letter of recommendation.
I'm sure they did that for Hank Gibbs. I'm sure.
Absolutely.
They played Northern Colorado last year. I'm sure Northern Colorado's new coach watched that film and said, hey, what do you guys think about Hank Gibbs coming up to Greeley? I mean, that, and Deshaun Woods, you don't want to lose the highest ranked recruit in program history, but when you repeatedly say, he's not practicing, he needs to work on his academics, and he doesn't end up ever practicing. I mean, that's not Deshaun Woods saying, oh, I'm going to USC.
No, there's nothing to do with loyalty with those guys. Jordan Vaughn, he was stacked behind a ton of dudes. He's a really talented kid. He's going to land on his feet. But Craig Bull quietly is doing that. And Jeff Linder did it after the Indiana loss. They lost their entire bench, and that wasn't guys entering the transfer portal. That was him going, hey, guys, you want to go play somewhere? Let me help you go play somewhere else. So, to me, the Cowboys' biggest loss, Pregnon, Oluwasi Omotosho, Cam Stone did some nice things here. Joshua Cobbs did some nice things here. But to me, Omotosho and Pregnon are the losses.
Yeah, and Omotosho would be that number 4 defensive end that we were just talking about. It's not.
You're right.
I mean, and from what I've heard, he's doing well at Oregon State. So,
I think Bull did a masterful job. I really do. And I think I've heard from every coach, really, that they upgraded with Harrison Whaley. He's going to be really good. That Keone Parks kid that's coming in from Wisconsin, the true freshman, he appears to be an absolute freak of an athlete. Every time I see him on Twitter, he's winning a gold medal somewhere or doing something fantastic. So I think they're really good at that spot, and it's a numbers game, and Craig's making sure he's got some offers out as we speak to a quarterback specifically that was at Coffeyville Junior College in Iowa. So he's playing the game and he's learned and he's bringing in, I believe you just interviewed the player personnel guy. I mean, that guy is so important.
Yeah, Kirby O'Mara. I mean, he's been in the SEC. He's been at Central Florida. He's from Texas, and they Gordy and him are studying the portal whenever they're not doing anything else, and that's for a team that's not going to add many portal guys. I mean, this is still going to be a high school recruiting developmental deal, but when you lose a guy like Pregnon or you lose a guy like Cam Stone, you got to replace them. And I would argue that Tyrekus Davis is an upgrade at cornerback over Cam Stone, and I love Cam Stone.
And we haven't seen David or Devin Body yet or Jair Asante. Those guys could be a major upgrade over Joshua Cobbs. We don't know yet, but I spoke to Jair Asante. He was at the spring game. He came in with his dad from New Jersey, and he's just a delight. And he is really excited to get here. Him and Body have already got this connection together where they're chatting all the time, and they feel like they can be the real burners at the wide receiver spot. They can be the real downfield threats. And a guy like Asante, he had a really great career at Holy Cross, and this is his last year. And he mentioned that to me when we were talking, that there's no transition period. It's time to come in and go to work and make hay right now because he wants to be in the NFL.
All right. Well, we will enjoy the summer. We'll still keep podcasting and writing, of course, but I believe July 19th will be the Mountain West Media Day event kickoff in Las Vegas. Where do you think Wyoming will be picked before I get you out of here? No divisions this year.
Yeah, no divisions. I think people are really still high on Fresno State, and I don't understand it. They lost absolutely a ton. They lost almost every impact guy they had. I don't believe in them at all. And I think they're going to be still up there probably. Air Force lost a lot of skilled guys too, and I know they're just a machine that keeps reloading, but there are times Air Force is down. I don't necessarily not believe in them, but I'm not necessarily putting them above Wyoming. I think CSU is completely rebuilding. They've got to be the youngest team in the country. New Mexico's New Mexico. I think San Diego State, I don't know if they've figured out their quarterback issue yet. I've told people numerous times, Ryan, I believe in this Cowboys team so much, I would have no problem even giving them a first place vote. But we don't know about the passing game, and we know Boise State's got themselves a hell of a quarterback. So I think Boise State, number one. I think Fresno State's probably still going to get enough love to maybe finish number two, I guess. I think San Diego State will be up there. Air Force will be up there. But I think Wyoming will be in the top five, if not the top four.
Yeah, I think I'll probably vote Boise State one because of the quarterback and just their roster is talented.
Yeah.
And Wyoming plays at Boise State where they've never beat the Broncos. So I'll probably go Boise 1, Wyoming 2, but my guess is the media in general will have Wyoming 4 or 5, just out of respect for Calhoun, annually winning 10 games, and Fresno State is the reigning champion. And San Jose State also did not lose much at all in the portal. They'll be up there, but I think the road to the championship goes through Boise, but you got to love the rest of Wyoming's schedule. Besides that trip to Boise, for sure.
Absolutely. And what do they like to say? Wyoming's due. Wyoming's due to win up there. I don't think they're going to give the Cowboys a ton of love, but I think if you're a Wyoming fan, you don't care.
You don't want them. You don't want number one.
No, and I don't think you even want them number two. Let them finish 4 or 5 and sneak up on the pack. So I love the way the Cowboys schedule shakes out. You and I talked about it after the spring game. Some people already have Texas Tech as an L. We don't at all. When you have an elite defense like the Cowboys should have, that's the games you can win. Winning in Texas is going to be really tough, obviously, but you have basically your first 7 games are at home aside from Austin, or your first 8, because let's face it, a ton of Wyoming fans go to Colorado Springs, and Wyoming traditionally plays Air Force so tough that I don't think you almost consider that a road game in a lot of ways. So Austin's pretty much your only road game for the first 8 weeks of the season. Yeah,
that's your airplane game. The rest are sleep in your hotel bed in Laramie or get on the bus. So I love that. I love that they're going to play all these home games when the weather's great. I love that Texas Tech was willing to come to Laramie. I think they're going to be potentially in the top 25 in the preseason. They beat Texas and Oklahoma last year for the first time ever in the same season, beat Ole Miss in a bowl game. There's a lot of momentum there. And they're probably going to overlook Wyoming because they happen to host Oregon in their home opener. So love the schedule, love the defense, love the kicking game, love the running game, and we'll figure out the passing game before July. So thanks, Cody. Thanks so much for hopping on, and we'll see you for a cold beer somewhere this summer.
Yeah, appreciate you, Ryan. I was thinking maybe Titus Swim could use his $3,000 and take us to dinner. And if not, best of luck in the Boulder. Hey, I'm jealous of your tan too, by the way.
$3,000 buys a lot of Coors, Cody.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, man.